Hello again, everybody. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports at WestchesterCountyPost.com. Please check out all our sports articles and videos at that location. Today we're going to talk about the biggest game of the year for Notre Dame. Notre Dame at Georgia, number 7 Notre Dame at number 3 Georgia. On the road in Athens, a very tough place to play. That'll be on CBS, 8 p.m. Eastern this Saturday. I'm going to talk about a few things, one of which I thought was the only time Coach Kelly was a bit testy at his press conference, and that is the perceived slow starts of Notre Dame. And I happen to believe they have been slow starts. In the first game, they were losing 14-7 to Louisville. Yes, they scored and scored and scored, but they got off to a bad start, I thought, when Louisville went down the field twice the first 2 times they had the ball. So I thought that was a slow start. And then this past week against New Mexico, even though the final was 66-14, as you all know, they didn't score an offensive touchdown for the first quarter and then the next 3 or 4 minutes of the second quarter. They had a defensive score, but it was only 7-0. And I understand at the end it was a total romp. But if you get off to a slow start in Athens against the number 3 team in the country, that could be a problem. Now, Coach Kelly was asked about it, and he just kind of blew the guy off. It was a pretty pointed slow start question. And he said, I don't agree with you. I don't see it that way. I thought they started slow in both of those games. And although I think Notre Dame can and will win the game, if they get off to a slow start in Athens against Georgia, it could be a long day for Notre Dame. Second thing I want to talk about is Cole Kmet, their star tight end, is returning. He hasn't played this year. He had that broken collarbone that he's just coming back from now. I had hoped he could play a few reps at New Mexico. Against New Mexico, they decided not to do that. Obviously, that's a coach's and medical decision. But he will be. He's down on the depth chart as the number 1 tight end. But that now gives Notre Dame, and Coach Kelly talked about this, 3 tight ends: Brock Wright, Tommy Tremble, Cole Kmet. And Coach Kelly even said they can use 2 tight ends, maybe even 3 tight ends. That could cause some matchup problems for Georgia's secondary. So look for that. Kmet's a star player. We'll see how much he has. I think he's a key factor in the game. As you all probably know, Georgia is loaded. Jake Fram, 75% completion, 3 games, 601 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. And you might not think those numbers are really high, but I think they really worked on their running game, where they have 4 quality runners, the best of whom is Andre Swift, who many predict will be a number 1 draft pick. Many people think Jake Fram is one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the country, and he probably is. But they're going to bring back after back. In the accompanying article to this video, you will see all the stats for all the running backs. Andre Swift is the main man, but you should take a look to see how many. Herrion's another one, Cook's another one. I mean, they have a ton of guys. And Coach Kelly specifically pointed out their left tackle. Their offensive line is very experienced, but he specifically pointed out Andrew Thomas, their left tackle, who he said is going to be a number 1 pick. So they might have 3 number 1 picks, in Fram the quarterback, Swift the running back, Thomas the left tackle. I want to step aside for a minute and talk briefly about, I thought this was interesting because it was discussed in Kirby Smart's Georgia press conference, the coach of Georgia, as you know, and Coach Kelly's as well. And that is, how can Notre Dame recruit in Georgia, right in Georgia's territory? And this year, and Kirby Smart talked about it more than Coach Kelly, but this year, Notre Dame got both freshman Tommy Tremble, Kyle Hamilton, the DB who had a pick 6 last week for a touchdown and has gotten rave reviews all since the beginning of preseason for Notre Dame. Those 2 guys live in the Atlanta area. That's the heart of Georgia, of course. And Kirby Smart spoke specifically about it and said, look, we recruited those guys very hard. I don't know if you guys know this, but Tommy Tremble, his father was an all-SEC DB at Georgia in the 90s, yet despite that, it came down to Georgia and Notre Dame, and Tommy Tremble, who of course got the game ball in week 1 this year as a freshman tight end, he decided to go to Notre Dame. So it's interesting in the recruiting wars where Notre Dame goes nationally that they can go into a place like Georgia and get 2 quality players like Tremble and Hamilton. That's something for now and for the future. So how is it that Notre Dame can win this game? They're like a 13-point underdog. I think they have a real chance. I think they have to key in on the Georgia running game. Again, Georgia has 4 quality backs led by Swift. I think they might have to put a bunch of guys in the box. As good as Fram is, his receivers are young. They're good, they're talented, but they're young. They talked about trying to get some chemistry between Fram and the receivers. Obviously, they won 55-0 last week. Again, you're not sure what this means when they play those kinds of teams, Arkansas State or New Mexico for Notre Dame. But I think they have to try and stop the run. I think that's their best hope. I think offensively, they're going to have to look to their wideouts to make some plays. They have the 3 tight ends. If they play them, maybe they can run a little. But, no Jafar Armstrong, that's a problem. Tony Jones is going to play. Smith is going to play. Maybe Avery Davis. You all saw him move from defense to offense, and his first touch last week was a 59-yard scoring run around the right end. He was untouched until maybe the 1-yard line, and he's got incredible speed, so maybe they can break something there. I think it's going to be up to the tight ends and the wideouts. Chase Claypool has played like a pro. You expect him to continue, hopefully, to play like a pro. Fink is Fink, Mr. Reliable. They've got some speed now with Keys. And even McKinley played really well last week. So they have 4 or 5 playmakers in the receiving game. And you hope Ian Book can have one of those book-like games where he can run if he has to. But most importantly, I think throw the ball down the field. I think they're going to need some big plays like they got last week. But of course, this week is a totally different animal when you're playing Georgia's defense. Their defense is very good. Their offensive line is very good. Their skill backs and quarterback, they're very good. I still think Notre Dame can win. And if they do, that'll be the biggest win of the year by far. And then they have a good chance to run the table if they can beat Georgia in Georgia. Even if they don't beat Georgia in Georgia, however, I think they can run the table after the fact and maybe have a chance to be, with 1 loss to Georgia, a Final Four team. I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves there, and this is the week, but this is probably the biggest non-conference game, number 3 against number 7, in the country this year. This is Steve Kallas speaking of sports. We'll see you the next time.